and how we can better treat those with interventions of a variety of forms. I want to say a couple of things before we get into the panel discussion. One, there are a lot of students in the room. So if you're a student, raise your hand. Okay. Let me just say a couple things to you specifically. Number one, I was not in your shoes. No one can be in anyone else's shoes, but I was a student 20 years ago. And if somebody had told me 20 years ago that I would be leading the National Science Foundation's newest directorate and first new directorate in more than 30 years, I would have looked at them and thought they were crazy. Didn't set out to do this, didn't expect to do this. I think that's probably the case for most of the folks on this panel and most of the folks that you'll come across. So if I can offer one piece of unsolicited advice, it's keep your eyes and ears open and don't necessarily have a plan. Just do good work hard. Be passionate about what you do. Wake up every morning excited about what you do, and you'll never know where you end up at the end of the day. The second thing that I would say in the context of the HBCU community, the notion of establishing a new directorate, TIP, is specifically tied to the fact that we have underinvested in HBCUs, minority-serving institutions, even specific states and regions across the country. As a matter of fact, 28 states in the United States today receive, out of the National Science Foundation, less than 15%, or prior to the passage of CHIPS and Science, received less than 15% of the National Science Foundation's budget. Think about that. 28 states and territories across the US, more than half, receiving just 15% of NSF's budget. So what we're trying to do with the TIP Directorate is put an intentional emphasis on how can we harness the full geography and the full demography of innovation that exists all across this country. You know, there are real-world pressing challenges in Louisiana. There are real-world pressing challenges in the upper Midwest. There are real-world pressing challenges in the heartland of America. And it's beyond time for us to go beyond a focus on the coasts, a focus on big urban cities, a focus on the well-known Research One institutions, to really cultivate opportunity everywhere across the country to really have the impact that we need to be able to have. It's been said that America's foremost advantage is the diversity that we have. Well, it's high time for us to really seize upon that. And I will just say that in that context, one of the things that is most important is being able to create the capacity at our institutions of higher education where we have historically underinvested. We can talk all we want about let's support research, let's support workforce development and so forth, but how do we make it possible for HBCUs across the landscape, not just the well-known ones, but HBCUs across the landscape to be able to have the ability to engage in this space? And that's something that we're especially focused on out of NSF and out of my directorate in TIP.
Thank you. In thinking about how to frame this conversation, there's many different ways we could do that in many different directions. But I'm going to use the framework I think about as in my position at UNCF, where we fund and engage all 102 HBCUs and have been doing so for over 80 years. And that's spaces and places, people, policy, and programs. All of that, of course, is in the context of a rapidly changing innovation ecosystem and technology landscape. We all have heard the buzzwords of AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning, cybersecurity, fintech and other areas, Web 3.0, blockchain, for instance. All these things are moving rapidly. We're now in what, ChatGPT 4 or 5? There's something now called Strawberry coming out. Which is interesting. They name them after fruits. I don't know why, but strawberry it is.
Raspberry Pi years ago.
Raspberry Pi, exactly. So wrapping our arms around these concepts is a challenge, whether you're coming from industry, whether you're coming from academia or government. Wanted to get your thoughts, we'll start with you, Professor Williams, about how you think about those things, people and places, policies, programs, and from the standpoint of an HBCU that is investing in the next generation of talent among African American youth and has been doing so for quite some time. How do you think about those things?
HBCUs are very good at value-added education, meaning that we are able to engage students however they come to the learning environment. If there's a deficit in funding, if there's a deficit in experience, or whatever the case may be, and then bring them to a point where they are able to compete in the marketplace and thrive. What is being called for now is deep learning competencies. Learning is the most critical skill. I frame it this way: we don't prepare students for success, we prepare them to be able to meet opportunity. That's different. That means that you are learning competent, you learn quickly. You encounter whatever the experience is, you interpret it, you come up with decisions, and then you go through that process of assessment over and over and over again. I think we really have to lean into that, and that's why I started out with speaking of the affective domain of learning. We need to lean into learning competencies and relational competencies on all levels, even as an institution. As I think about our next run, let's focus on those things that supercharge learning ability, so that whatever change comes, and I think Erwin said he did not expect to be where he is now, and that's going to happen for everybody. You may end up, I'm in a very different place than I expected to be. But am I able to meet that experience? Am I able to navigate the uncertainty and to move forward? So that's how I think about it. How we do that, I think it's an ongoing process, not only for the individual students, but for the institutions. The institutions must be learning institutions. We're in a moment where we are receiving resources at a clip that we have not received them in the past. We have more students. We have enrollments that are growing. We are challenged because of capacity. So how do we learn quickly and meet the moment? Because if we aren't learning as institutions and meeting the moment, if we aren't learning as individuals and meeting the moment, we will miss it. So I would like for us to get as much as we can out of what is happening right now, and also focus on increasing our learning capacity. I'll stop there.
Excellent, thank you. Jared, what are your thoughts?
So my thought is that AI has the potential to, AI in particular, among other emerging technologies, has the potential to do great good and great harm. And with regard to HBCUs, what I think is a grounding understanding is that they have provided historically, and in this moment, in their graduates, a model of ethical leadership for the country. And that as we continue to advance this technology, that, along this thread around learning, that it's critical to ensure that there is AI skilling across HBCUs and in a multidisciplinary manner. So it's not people with exclusively a traditional computer science and engineering background, but it's also your social scientists, your people with the humanities background, because there's a fundamental understanding or point of view that we have at Microsoft, which is that as this technology continues to evolve, that a part of what we must do is not only ensure that there are people to actually develop and deploy the technology, but also to put a regulatory framework, legal regulatory frameworks in place to ensure that the technology is responsive to the needs of the community. We need people in place to have more of a social and ethical perspective about the technology so that it doesn't go totally off the guardrails. So what's been exciting, in our capacity as a funder, working closely with the HBCU Responsible Computing Network, which is housed at Stillman College. They are a consortium of 17 HBCUs across the country, and they've been training social science and humanities faculty on how to integrate ethical AI principles into their curriculum. This is a part of a broader effort at Microsoft in partnership with our philanthropies team, where they're aiming to train nearly 2 million people with a significant focus on HBCUs around AI skilling over the course of the next handful of years. So I think that, for me, I think that we're in an interesting moment whereby, there's a lot of anxiety and concern about the technology, not only in terms of its potential harms, but I think also in terms of, the capacity of the technology to replace the human. What's been interesting is that we've seen through George Washington University some early, I believe they call it socio-technical testing, which indicates that yes, there will be some elements of people's jobs that will be replaced with the new technology, but it's going to create a whole new host of responsibilities. So get excited. We're all still going to have jobs. But yeah, I think that, for us, it is really having a grounded perspective and understanding that we have to do more as a company to ensure that AI skilling is widespread, and ensuring that there's a multidisciplinary framework and that we're looking to talent outside of the traditional confines of computer science and engineering exclusively.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
So I couldn't agree more with what the professor and what Jared have both articulated in the last few minutes. I think the importance of the social sciences, the importance of really thinking about the broad classes of skills that are necessary to be successful, I think are critically important here. I'm going to take a slightly different tack, though, in response to your question, or at least try to. First and foremost, I think what Jared just said about AI is absolutely fundamentally true about any of the key technology areas that we talk about today. Take biotechnology, for example. There's a lot of innovation taking place in terms of protein design. There's a lot of innovation taking place in terms of genomic engineering and so forth. As you think about those types of capabilities and approaches, thinking through what are the governance aspects, what are the guardrails that we should be designing in so that we don't end up in a situation like we have with AI, for example, where generative adversarial networks can result in deep fakes that cloud people's judgment and people's understanding of what's actually happening. Same thing's true in the wireless space. What is wireless? Wireless is about sensors at the edge, sensors all around us that are capturing data about us. Well, understanding where those data are going and what's happening with those data, I think, is critically important. And so there are a huge class of privacy questions that need to be tackled in that realm. But I think all of this ultimately comes down to the fact that this is about putting people first, right? When we're thinking about new technologies, whether it be ChatGPT or bioengineering capabilities, it's about who are the users, who are the consumers, who are the beneficiaries of those technologies, who are the folks who potentially don't benefit from those technologies, and how do we think about in the design, the development, and the deployment of those technologies, those individuals, and how do we incorporate those individuals' perspectives into the work that's happening with regard to the key technologies that we've talked about.